This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. This week's episode is brought to you by the Friends of the Magic Word. Those are the ones who, thanks to their financial support, help sponsor this program from week to week and allow us to keep this free and open on the internet for anyone to listen to in perpetuity. And although we don't have anyone new to welcome to the Friends of the Magic Word this week, I thought it appropriate just to give thanks to those who continue to support us through their pledges and through their regular donations. And if you are not one of those Friends of the Magic Word and would like to help us, we certainly could use your financial support because, again, that's what helped pay for our hardware and software, and also the ability to go to some of these magic conventions that we give you these daily reports. I feel that what we're doing here actually is not only helping you to understand who was at the convention and make you feel as if that you're there, even though you may not be attending the convention, but also to go back and listen to these reports and hear the names and voices of some of the people who had attended and been part of these conventions. And perhaps they can learn from what they did then as well. Anyhow, I want to make an appeal. Just feel like this is PBS or NPR or someone making a financial appeal, but it is that time when I would like to implore you to please give, and if you can do it with a monthly pledge through patreon.com or even through PayPal, that'd be great. If you can only do a donation, a one-time thing, that would be wonderful also, and you can then perhaps give ongoing donations from time to time as your financial situation is able to support us. And if you can't do that, then there are a couple other ways that you can support us. One is certainly if you would just take the time to go over to Google Play or to iTunes and give us a 5-star review and also leave us some comments as to how much you enjoyed this podcast. That will help us grow a lot. We really would appreciate that because it's the 5-star reviews that help us reach more magicians throughout the world as they hear about this podcast as well. The other way is, of course, the most easy perhaps, and that is if you purchase anything on Amazon. And who doesn't? If you'll just go to the bottom page of any of our blogs at the themagicwordpodcast.com, at the bottom of the blog, you will see a banner that will say, click here for helping us through your purchases on Amazon. We are part of Amazon's affiliate program, which means that for every purchase that you make, we get just a few cents back through their affiliate program. And we thank Amazon, and we most especially thank you. And as we start to get into the holiday season, people will be buying things, and so I know it's an easy way to do it. Just click on that and help us out as best you can. Well, I guess one more thing while I'm pitching stuff here right now, and that is to make sure whenever you go to the Magic Word Podcast, if you have not already joined our pod letter, just subscribe there, and we will let you know from week to week who it is that's on the podcast that particular week, who's coming up next week, and also a suggestion from the archives. And if we have contests from time to time, we will report those there first, so this way that you'll have an opportunity to make sure you don't forget to enter the contest. All right, let's get into this week's episode. We are going to be talking this week with Meadow Perry. We chatted while we were at the SAM convention in New Orleans earlier this summer, and we had a chance to sit down and talk with her. Meadow has been doing a bubble act for a while, and I have seen her perform in different places. Personally, I've seen her perform at Poe's Magic Symposium or Magic Conference. Also, when I was out to do some consulting and also for the shoot for the 9th season of the Masters of Illusion television show on the CW, she was there also, plus a few other conventions where I've seen her perform then as well. And she has a most marvelous act. And if you haven't seen it, then I suggest that you just go to the website of the magicwordpodcast.com, and there you'll see a few videos that will link to her, so this way you can see some of the things she's doing. It's not just blowing bubbles and not just putting smoke in some bubbles or doing some of the things you may have seen before, but this one thing I think is phenomenal is this window that she has, if you will. It just it pulls down and she can blow bubbles through this window. Golly, the thing she does with that is just incredible. Now, of course, she's not the first person to blow bubbles to make an act out of blowing bubbles, I should say, because Tom Noddy has been someone who has attended and performed at the IBM Magic Conventions as well as other places, so magicians have seen him. But it's been a long number of years since we've actually had bubble acts as the variety act in a magic show. And so we talk a little bit about bubble acts being the variety act because you typically think of juggling or ventriloquism as being a variety act at magic conventions, but the bubble act is quite different. And so if some of you are organizing magic conventions, you might think about hiring Meadow Perry because she's lovely to work with and be around, and also her act is beautiful. I know that you'll enjoy it. Well, she has a lot to say and to share with us here this week, so please welcome my guest, Miss Meadow Perry, here on The Magic Word. Today I have someone with me who I have been seeing on the rise for the last couple of years, and is someone who is getting more and more popular. And if you haven't had a chance to see her act live, then perhaps you may have seen it on television or on YouTube, or you should follow her on Instagram, certainly. She's all over the place and all over the world, although she comes from Philadelphia. And she's got an amazing act. We're going to talk about that, which is a little bit different kind of magic. It's using bubbles. So please welcome my guest, Meadow Perry. Hey, Meadow.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So glad that you're here. This is great because it seems like whenever that you go to a magic convention, it is the juggler who you always remember that outshines, it seems like, the rest of the magicians just because of the difference. So do you find, like, whenever you're performing, that your bubble act is something that people will remember and it's what they talk about?
Yes. It is definitely something, even amongst jugglers. So I like that I get to dip my toe in both sides of the river. At the jugglers convention, I'm the magician. At the magicians convention, I'm the juggler. So I get to be both, and it's really great because bubble artistry doesn't fit into one slot. We kind of fit into all of them.
Right.
So I get to play in both worlds, but it's so fun. Even though I do a lot of magic, the bubble artistry is often what people remember and want to talk about.
Well, I want to get into this a little bit in detail, because people are thinking, wait a minute, I don't understand bubbles and what does that got to do with magic, and most people just think of bubbles that kids have and they blow out of a bottle or something. So tell us about the type of act that you have and what you do.
Well, I combine bubble artistry with magic, and oftentimes when people say, well, what in the heck is bubble magic? I tell them, well, I make bubbles do the things that you didn't even know that bubbles could do.
Yeah.
And I think it's surprising to a lot of people, because you're right, most people's experience with bubbles is just, playing with them as a kid or playing them with their kids, blowing bubbles, and that they're just fun and sweet and kind and playful. And I've sort of taken it to this cabaret elegance style. And I think that's surprising to people, that we can appreciate the artistry and the beauty of bubbles in that format.
Because they're kind of geometric patterns and things. It's not just round bubbles.
Correct.
And that's why I think, because you could do square bubbles.
Absolutely.
And things.
Absolutely.
And of course, with different colored smoke, you can have different colored bubbles, I guess.
Well, to not go too much into the science, having colored bubbles is a little more challenging because having colored smoke, you often have to introduce things like sulfur, which pops the bubbles. So you have to stay more with fog or using lighting design, smart lighting design, to make the colors happen.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
I recall that Carisa Hendrix had a bubble lecture, and she did bubbles for a while. I don't know if she still does now. She's really Lucy Darling all the time.
Lucy Darling has taken over a lot of her life, but she does still do bubbles. She still is involved with Bubble U, which we both...
What is Bubble U?
University. Yeah, Bubble U is a one-stop shop for your bubble performance needs. It was founded by Carisa Hendrix. and she kind of found me during the pandemic, like a lot of people did, with my virtual show. And
because you were doing bubbles before she was doing it then?
I'm not sure when she started doing bubbles, but she was definitely probably doing them before me. I just went a little more hardcore into bubbles.
You were all in.
Yeah. So I think when she saw my show, she said, "Oh, this is the person that needs to be a part of Bubble U," and she asked me to be a part of it, and I was really honored. So that's been a lot of fun to make tutorials, and I've learned a lot along the way that when you do something and it comes easy to you, you kind of take it for granted, and you don't really realize how hard it is until you try to teach it to somebody else, and you're like, oh wow, this is a really hard concept to grasp. And certainly I think some of my other disciplines that I've learned, such as vocal technique with breath control, have helped immensely, because that is something that is hard to describe to someone. Because,
so you're actually more from the diaphragm or something?
So there are certain bubble tricks that
I did not know that.
You can't use too harsh of a breath, and you can't use too soft of a breath. It has to be kind of in a sweet spot, and then other ones, it has to be softer. And so, you have to really understand your breath control to do bubbles. So
it's not just thinking about the science and the chemistry of the type of liquid you would use and everything, which we'll get to then later, but it's also about the breath control.
Right.
I never thought about that. I just thought, you blow.
Right.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Wow. There's a lot more to that.
Yeah,
then.
absolutely.
So in Bubble U, that's something that's online, or do they have, you said you have tutorials so they can actually buy a series, I guess, and watch at their leisure.
There's a lifetime membership, and you can find it at nonsensekids.com. You can find out more information about that, but there's full tutorials. There are recipes for bubbles. There are resource guides, and there are full scripts that Carisa and I have both developed. Basically, we just hand a bubble show to you and give you tips and tricks. And then we have an online forum on Facebook where if you have an issue that pops up or you need advice for something, we're happy to be there and give our expertise.
Do you have some body or bodies that you, Meadow, have been mentoring?
There are quite a few in Bubble U. One that probably stands out to me is Primrose the Fairy, who has been at the Arizona Renaissance Fair. She's also at the Pittsburgh Renaissance Fair. And she was doing bubbles before joining Bubble U, but now she is starting to expand on her bubble skills. And I'm happy to have made a friend with Primrose the Fairy, and because we have Renaissance fairs in common.
Right.
I used to be a bubble fairy. That's really how I got started. So it's kind of a gateway.
So Bubble Fairy, explain that, please.
I used to do character work as for birthday parties as a princess impersonator.
I remember talking with Katrina, who does.
I think that's a lot of particularly women in magic. That's a lot of us.
How they get started, kind of doing princess
magic.
party. Yeah.
It's princess parties because it's, you realize at one point, oh, I can't be a princess forever. I either age out of this or I'm going to turn into the evil queen. So, so you have to find some other skills, and I didn't want to be a clown. So I created this fairy character because that seemed princess-like, but something that you could age with. And I had a bunch of friends say, wow, you should take this character to the Renaissance Fair. She fits in. So Meadowlark the Fairy was born.
Awesome.
And I did that for a while at the New Jersey Renaissance Fair and some other Ren fairs, but it became so popular, and I became thirsty for more bubble knowledge and discovering that I needed magic in my tool belt as a backup for when the bubbles didn't work or it was too windy. So that's kind of how the marriage of bubble artistry and magic sort of happened in my show. Is I needed the backup, and then the pandemic happened when I debuted my show, so it's just been growing since then. But that's.
So do you have time for Renaissance festivals anymore with the rest of what you're doing?
I am doing 2 more Renaissance festivals this year.
Okay.
I'm doing the Ravenwood Renaissance Festival in Virginia. I think it's Virginia. And then the other one is I'll be back here in Louisiana for the Louisiana Ren Fair. So
one of the things, as you mentioned, had to do with the wind. And so I'm sure that you have to deal with that when you're on stage, with making sure that you're not kind of underneath where there's a vent coming in, blowing on you and all that kind of thing. But when you're outdoors and you can't control that kind of environment, do you just have to kind of say, well, we're not going to have a show, or come back in a half hour and we'll try it again, or what?
Well, so that's where I have some more magic in my toolkit.
I see.
But when it gets super duper windy, sometimes there's some magic that you can't even, you can't do cards, they're going to blow away. So I've been leaning more and more into the comedy and improv.
Have you? Do you go to like comedy shops now or anything?
I don't. I've been learning a lot from Michael Dardant. He's kind of brilliant at comedy.
So he's been kind of a mentor to you.
Yeah, he's been kind of a mentor and teaching me like some of the rules of comedy, the rules of three, and he often gives me suggestions of, if you did it on this beat, or if you just wait a second and let the audience fill in the blank, it becomes much funnier. So finding those little nuances in your routine really helps. But seeing some of the work that he's done when stuff happens on stage and he just improvs his way through it.
Right. And it looks like
brilliant.
It's natural, sure.
It looks like it's natural. And I actually, there was one day at the New Jersey Ren Fair this year where it was just so windy and I couldn't do really anything. So I just went with the little bits of magic that I could, and I filled in the blanks with comedy. I kept making jokes about the wind and how, wow, this show really blows away. And the audience was, they were on my side. They really were in it. And I walked away from that thinking that was the worst show I've ever done.
Right.
But I had so many people come up to me and say, wow, that was funny. That was the situational comedy is brilliant and great. And, you just take what you're handed and go with it.
It gave you confidence.
It gave me confidence, 100%. And, having people give me feedback like that of like, wow, we were disappointed that you didn't get to do the bubbles, but we understand that it was, 15-mile-per-hour winds. Who could do it? So, and we're outside. We understand what this is. We're outside at a Renaissance fair.
Right.
But you handled it brilliantly. And so
are you on the stage then when you do RenFest? I mean, I know sometimes they have stages, sometimes you're just on the grass, and occasionally they have tents you can kind of go into.
Sometimes it's Meadow in the Meadow.
Yeah. Okay.
I prefer having tents. Now at the Ravenwood Ren Fair, they do have me in a barn. So that'll be great. There's anytime that I can get sides that can block the wind, that's fabulous.
Get a little control.
Yeah. Louisiana Ren Fair, I should actually talk to Alvin since he's here at the SAM convention. I don't know that they will have a space for me indoors, but we're going to make it work. I have some new magic pieces. And so one rule I have for my show is that everything has to revolve around bubbles. It is the Bubble Magic Show. But hey, if it involves queens and kings, it can be a soap opera. So
yeah, you've got some great puns, I can tell that already.
It's a really slippery soap.
So do you keep these things written down, or I'm sure that you get some lines thrown at you from time to time?
I get lines thrown at me all the time.
Yeah. You think, that's brilliant. You go back and write down so you don't forget them?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
Slippery soap, that came from Francis Minotti in Philly. So thank you, Francis.
Now, you and I talked some time ago about Tom Noddy, and he was an inspiration to you then as well. And Tom Noddy was on the cover of the Linking Ring from the International Brotherhood of Magicians, and many years ago I remember seeing him perform. He was the first person, and that was in the 80s, early 80s, I think, when I first saw him perform. And I think he was even on Johnny Carson's show, Tonight Show.
And I think David Letterman, too.
Him. Yeah, okay.
He actually has a really wonderful story about coming to the IBM convention, and he's like, wow, I didn't know computers were this big. But he's a wonderful storyteller, and he loves to talk about his time with Slidini and being on tour with, Avner the Eccentric and touring with all these big legendary names that we know. So it's really great to talk to him. But he definitely went into the IBM convention not really knowing what it was with magicians.
Funny.
And so hearing the story, I did an interview with him, a little one-off podcast interview with him for Bubble U. So if you are a Bubble U member, you can go listen to the Tom Noddy interview, and he talks all about his experience at the IBM convention and the Johnny Carson show, and how he basically like haggled them for somebody like, well, no, I'm an original act, and you're going to give me this much money, and that he's like, wow. Meanwhile, that was like the most he'd ever made off of doing Bubbles. So,
he's a good con man too.
Yeah, good con man, trying to get the most out of the act when he could, and
sure,
it's really amazing to hear those stories.
And he's still going.
He is, yeah. He's performing. He's been performing in Germany, and then he also performs at the Moisture Festival
up in Oregon or Washington.
Yeah, I think it's Seattle. It's near Seattle, I think. And he lives up that way. He does the county fair, and he's a big draw for that county fair up there. So there will just be a huge crowd, and if you don't get there early, you don't get a good seat, and you can't see the bubble magic.
He's that popular.
He's very popular.
So was he the first bubble person that you saw or heard about, or how did you kind of get into that then?
How did I get into it? So a magician had told me to try the big bubbles. I was already doing, I was everyone's favorite ice queen for birthday parties, and I was freezing bubbles. It was basically Molly McBubble, but I didn't really consider it a magic trick at the time. It was just a silly little thing I did for kids. But that was really the first bubble magic that I did. But the first bubble person that I came across was probably Doug Stafford, who's a magician and juggler in the Philadelphia area. And he's done big bubbles at Ren fairs as kind of an aside from his
by the way,
show.
Talking inside baseball for some people here, when you talk about big bubbles, those are the kinds where people stand inside. Is that the ones you're talking about?
No, actually, they're just the really big. You use 2 sticks and some string.
Okay.
We call them tri-string wands because you usually want to put a weight in the middle. So it makes sort of a triangular shape. And you dip those strings in and you open them up and you make a giant bubble.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's actually a version that was invented in the 80s by a guy named Mike Miller. Not the Mike Miller we know, a different Mike Miller. But that basically was just invented by that guy in like Malibu or something. And it's become a popular children's toy, and if you make bigger versions, you can make bigger bubbles. So there's been a lot of Guinness World Records for the biggest bubble. But so making the big bubbles, it really relies on your recipe. So, which is like the secret sauce.
Okay.
So that's been a really popular thing at Renaissance fairs because it seems old-timey, even though it's not. People consider it. They're like, well, that must be how they made bubbles back in the day in the Renaissance.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll go with that.
Like, yeah, well, yes.
It was really in the 80s, but, not the 80s, but the 1980s.
Right.
So that was the first person or first thing you saw with the big bubbles?
That was the first.
Got you sidetracked there, sorry.
Yeah, that was the first person I saw with the big bubbles, and then I met a couple other bubble artists along the way, and just I became a part of the Association of International Bubble Artists, which I discovered during the pandemic, and I just connected with so many wonderful bubble artists. There's a wonderful woman in Russia. Her name is Darina. And she's the one who I got a lot of my props from. And that's been just so wonderful to be able to dive into more of the bubble artistry world. I
think I talked with you before also about Faverty.
Richard Faverty.
Yeah, Faverty.
Yeah.
Because he was Mr. Bubbles for a long time before he became the world famous photographer that he is now for doing so many promo shots out there. So you met him, I guess, then? And
I haven't met him in person.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
But we have had a delightful phone conversation about photography and bubbles.
Just because he's such a nice guy. I mean, of course we have a delightful conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully one day I'll get to go because he really understands how to light and photograph bubbles. So it would be great to do a photo shoot.
Are you going to be going to Las Vegas anytime soon?
I don't know if it'll happen this year, but maybe next year.
See, the idea, I'm thinking, because he does have a background in bubbles, and because of what you do, and now he's a photographer, I think he would just have some great ideas and would love to spend time with you. I got this idea. I can just imagine in his studio what he could do with you. It would be phenomenal.
We will nerd out
Won't
so
you?
Good.
I'd kind of like to be a fly on the wall to watch all that. That'd be a great photo shoot there. Again, you're just kind of developing other things. Well, one thing I think obviously is impressive, I'd never seen until you did it, was that window type of a thing where you drop that into, you can explain it better than me.
Yeah.
Go ahead, explain what this is.
A lot of bubble artists call it the bubble frame.
Okay.
I call it the bubble wall. It was invented by Pep Boo in Barcelona in the 80s, maybe in the 70s, but he became really popular with it in the 80s, performing with it. And there's a lot of Russian bubble artists and Italian bubble artists that also perform the bubble wall or the bubble frame. I first saw... where was it? I saw Marco Zappi from Italy. I saw a video of him doing it at... what is the magic in France? It's like Café de Magie or something. Café du something.
Oh, where Alexandria de Vivier is?
Yes. I think he performed it there, and it was televised. And so I saw that on YouTube, and I said, wow, I really want to do that. So I reached out to Darina in Russia, who also performs it, and she also creates the props for a soap bubble show. So I decided to just buy the props and see what I could do with it. And I got those props and I sat on them for 6 months going, oh my God, what have I done? I can't do this. And then I just ended up just playing with it and figuring it out. And it's been my favorite thing since. But there's only a handful of us in the United States that perform it. And of course, we all have our own unique styles. And I think that's really important, just like a juggler. And so it's funny to me when people say, it's the most unique thing. And I'm like, I'm not the only one who does it. But, and it's not mine. I didn't invent it. But we all, just like a juggler with this routine or with certain magic effects, it's like a classic.
Right.
And you put your own spin on it and it becomes this piece of you that's known.
I know you've been doing it then on the Masters of Illusion, on the CW. Have you been on Penn and Teller?
I have not been on Penn and Teller. They've been interested in a piece of mine, but decided that it wasn't the best.
It makes for good television, but it's kind of hard to. It's not really a fooler. It's like it's bubbles.
Yeah. Well, I do have a magic trick. I don't want to reveal too much of it, but that I invented and I think would be really great for it. But it involves playing cards, and of course they're limited with how many playing card effects they can put on.
Right.
So I'm sure that's why I didn't get a call back.
Okay.
But maybe next year.
Yeah. They're considering it, I guess, at some point.
Yeah.
Well, as far as other types of places then that you work, you've worked overseas then too. We were talking about Tom Noddy worked in Germany, but
I actually haven't worked overseas yet.
Okay.
It is a dream. It's a goal of mine. I've been asked a couple times, but the contracts have never worked out. I don't even have a passport, so I'm working on it.
Yeah, you need to get a passport because what if somebody calls you tomorrow and says, hey, you'll be here next week?
I actually got a call. That's exactly what happened this morning.
Okay, there you go.
I got a call to do a year contract in China.
Wow.
But they want you like next week. And I'm like, there's no way. I have so many contracts right now that I have to fulfill. I can't get out of. Plus, I can't get my life together in 1 week with my kids and trying to figure out to do a whole year in China. There's just no way.
Yeah.
But, that's a great opportunity for somebody.
Right. They're specifically looking for a bubble person, I guess, then too.
Yeah, they're specifically
so I guess you got to
looking
put that out to bubble you.
I did. I already put it out to a bunch of bubble people, and they said, oh, yeah, they seem like they really need someone.
Right.
I don't know if they had an act back out or something happened, but they seem very desperate to get someone very last minute.
Well, as I said, it's always good to have a passport than to not have one and wish you had one, just as fast as something comes up, because it could have been, a week's job or as opposed to a year or whatever, someplace else. Have you put together a lecture similar to what Carisa has that's on just bubbles as well?
I have.
For conventions, I'm just kind of trying to help you promote that if you do.
Yes, I do. I will actually be doing a lecture. We haven't specifically set the date. It'll probably be the September 16th up in New Jersey, Sparta, New Jersey. I'm doing their stage up there. There's a little magic theater up there. I'll be doing a show on the 15th of September and then probably a lecture the next day. So I'll be doing that. But I do my whole lecture on bubble magic. I've presented it to a couple online magic groups. The IBM, I did it for the IBM a couple years ago, and the SAM Centennial Celebration up in Boston last year. I also did my lecture.
Right.
But I'm also working on a theatricality and magic lecture, and talking about some vocalization and how our experiences color our voices in our magic and things like that. So kind of inspired by Carisa and how she pulls from her art school expertise, and she puts that into her lecture. I decided I have some expertise in the theater world that I can pull from, but more importantly, I want to talk about networking, because I think in the theater world, that is one of the things that I really has given me a lot of success in magic. Is I know how to network really well. I know how to make connections with people, and that's really important. You know, I wouldn't have gotten Masters of Illusion if I hadn't connected with Anthony Darkstone, and he connected me with Gay Blackstone. So those connections are really important, and I think that I have that perspective and that experience that I can share with magicians.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about something that I heard Tina Leonard say here recently about how that she was performing on a FISM show one time, and the thing was apparently she had already performed once, and they had a spot that came open on the final night show, and she said, well, they've already seen me. Said, yeah, but we need somebody that's just the right amount of act or time, and she decided to do it, and decades later, she's still getting work from that, because unbeknownst to her at the time, that's the final night whenever they, of course, were giving away the awards, and that's when all the booking agents come to see who won, basically, to try to book those acts. And she's just, it's all through networking, because, you know, one thing kind of, one piece of work will actually get another piece of work. You know, you just kind of have to parlay one into the next. Right,
because I think that's the important thing that a lot of people don't understand. You can be really good, but if you don't network, no one knows that you're good. So you work as often as you can. That's what I was going to get to ultimately, because it sounds like working Renfests and conventions and any and everywhere. I mean, I'm sure you're trying to say, I'm available. Just book me. You know, put me in, coach. I mean, I'd like to try to get, I want to get experience, but more important than the experience is that you want to make the network. You want to make the connections. Yes. I think the connections are really important. I really believe in, you know, when you meet someone, you need to treat them like they're someone who's very important, because they could be, you don't know yet. You don't know that they're going to be important to you.
That's right.
So especially when I go to these magic conventions, I like to stop and spend time with these other magicians who have been in the game for a really long time.
Right.
And I saw that so well demonstrated at the IBM when Jeff McBride was sessioning, and he was kind of giving deference to these older magicians who have been doing it for 50 years, and saying, Meadow, have you met Rick? Meadow, have you met John? Meadow, have you met Greg?
Whomever.
And no, I haven't met them. Well, he did this, and he was up, you know, he was here when Doug Henning was at this convention back in 19 whatever.
Right.
Like, so he's got great stories to share with you. And those stories are little nuggets and gold that I think that we should cherish, and we should do this networking and give importance to everyone.
Well, that's why I think it pays to be nice to everybody.
Yes.
You know, AJ has a book out that's called The Art of Schmoozing, and it is not schmoozing because you're trying to get something, but it's just because you're a nice person, and so people will know that you are genuine, as opposed to, hey, he's just schmoozing me to try to get something out of me. But if you just always are a nice person, then people like to do business with friends.
Correct.
You know, ultimately.
That's I get work in Washington, D.C. from an agency that they would rather hire me all the way from Philadelphia rather than some of the local talent, because they said, you're such a joy to work with, and you're so nice, and you're not a diva.
Right.
So it really does pay to schmooze.
Yeah, it does. And also just to be a nice person, and you just put your finger on it right there, Meadow, as far as being a nice person to work with, that you're going to be easy to get along with, you're flexible, and it's like, hey, I'm sorry that you need to go a little bit longer, I can do that, or, you know, sure, if you need to put somebody in this, I mean, don't act like a diva, I mean, act like a real person.
Right,
you know?
Right. And I often tell my friends when I'm at places, I say, I'm so sorry. I want to spend time with you. This is great. I'm loving this conversation, but I need to go schmooze with these people that I don't normally get to see. I need to go make these connections.
Yeah, it seems like each year or each visit, whenever I see Lisa Mena, that she says, I love you. I'd like to spend some more time with you, but this is only once every 3 years. There are people here that I'm not going to get to see again for another 3 years, so excuse me, I really need to talk to this. Nothing against, I want to spend time with you, but we will at other times. Other times we see each other. But
recognizing when the opportunities are and what's limited.
Similarly, when I'm at magic conventions, a lot of times, I mean, I love my friends from my hometown, and if I want to go to dinner or something, it's like, but I'd like to go with somebody that I'm not, I mean, I can see you anytime, love these guys. I also love everyone else I'd like to spend some time with that I rarely get to see. So, I want to try to network and schmooze with some other people over there. You mentioned Jeff McBride's name there a while ago, and I was going to bring him up earlier, but since you had mentioned that, that was the one of the first guys I remember seeing. Well, maybe Vito Lupo, I guess, was actually working with some bubbles. But then Jeff had been taking that to another level, but not as a feature in his act, but something he was doing. Has he spent any time with you and inspired you with his bubbles?
Yes, actually. We do a mentorship every month. I do his one-on-one, and it's been phenomenal. He's such a wealth of knowledge.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my gosh. He has turned me on to so many classics of magic that he's like, oh, you could try this, you could try that. So there's a lot of things that I'm working on that he's suggested, and he's given a lot. And actually, he did give me a bubble trick that I now use in my show. So,
Okay. Wow, that is pretty cool. I know also Finn John used to use a lot of bubbles in his act as well as loops and things. And, of course, Dirk Losander does as well. So, again, it's a different kind of things of what they do with their bubbles than what you do. But they do some magic using invisible loops and everything, then too. So have you spent any time then with...
I have spent some time working with loops and IT and bubbles. They are a little tricky because you have to get your recipe just right for that. And the conditions have to be just right. If you hear Tom Noddy talk about his experience with Finn John, where they were on the bill together, Finn John told Tom Noddy, wow, you're like what to threads is what I am, or you're like what to bubbles is what I am with threads. You understand the limits and how far you can push them before they break. And so it's interesting to think of it in that regard. That
for their tensile strength.
Their tensile strength. And it's really interesting. And I have played with IT, and I've had some magician friends of mine go, oh, because Meadow, bubbles weren't hard enough. You have to add this other really hard element, really fragile element. Great, but I've been really inspired by Vito Lupo and Dirk Losander and Finn John and Jeff McBride. Even all the combinations of magic with bubbles is fascinating to me.
It really is. One of the things I remember that I know that Losander does, and that is like with a linking ring, just a ring, basically, that he has a bubble and it kind of bounces it, which apparently in the middle with, just thin air. I had an idea some time ago about maybe using like a tennis racket without any catgut in it, so it'd be empty, and it would make sense in today's environment. Most people they don't know what linking rings are, except that's something magicians use. But if you use a tennis racket, you can again have it empty like that. As far as they can't see whatever, invisible threads might be in there, but you can still bounce something, as if or with a smaller bubble, perhaps, that you're going to be, bouncing it from what, just throwing out an idea there.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I love when there are things in magic that look like everyday objects.
Exactly.
That are relatable.
It makes more sense if you can kind of bring that up to date, because there have been so many things that, unfortunately, a lot of magicians, it's the first way they learned it and how they saw it, and they're still performing it that way 30, 40 years later of the same way. Not that that's all bad. It's just that, think about getting get some clean underwear, man. Get a new suit. We're not wearing ruffled shirts and tuxedos anymore, kind of a thing. So you need to bring that. Well, another thing obviously has to do with the question of the science of the bubble then itself. And you said there are different formulas, and does that have to do with the environment? That is, if you anticipate it's going to be windy, you use a different kind of formula than you do when you think you're working indoors?
Yes. So I always carry a hygrometer when I'm going to performance spaces, which is it tests the humidity in the
that?
air.
Oh, okay.
And you usually see it in gardens. It usually has the thermometer and it'll have the humidity on it.
Okay, I never thought about the humidity being affecting the bubble.
Yeah, so I constantly know kind of what the weather is doing, what the humidity is. And, of course, down here in New Orleans, it's very humid. Though we seem to have a little break from the humidity. But
boy, do we. This is a kind of break.
I know. So there are different recipes depending on what I'm going to be doing and where I'm going to be at. So if I'm going to be indoors or outdoors, the indoors recipe is a little thinner, then the outdoor recipe is a lot thicker and what we call self-healing. So it can be in the wind and be a little wobbly without breaking. It can take a little more of that strength, but it's also heavier. So that outdoor recipe won't work for my little sculptures because it will just drag, that bottom bubble will just drag the whole sculpture down and it'll drop, which happens sometimes. Then also, depending on the weather outside, if it is a very damp, moisture day, I won't need as much of the concentrate from my outdoor show. So I water it down. If it's a hotter day or if it's a more humid day, I can water it down a lot more because it's going to hang in the air a bit more.
Which do you prefer? I mean, do you prefer the lighter ones, I assume?
I prefer performing indoors.
Well, yeah.
I prefer not being exposed to the elements. But it's challenging indoors too, because even though you've tested the space, you've tested the theater and being on the stage and making sure there's no drafts.
And then once all the audience gets in there, it's a whole different thing.
Correct. Yeah. Once you get warm bodies in there, it changes the whole dynamic. So it's frustrating sometimes. Like even my my contest performance the other night when I did the tornado bubble, I tested the space ahead of time and it was fine. It was very still. But there was a little bit of drag of wind when I actually performed it, which I can handle most movements of the wind. I can kind of go with them. But for less seasoned bubble artists, that's very frustrating.
And the tornado bubble is whenever that you have the smoke that's inside and it's kind of twirling around.
Yes.
And then you poke the top like a volcano.
Yeah, it's a smoke tornado inside a bubble and it comes out the top. And sometimes I forget how not normal the things that I do are. So trying to explain them to people.
Well, that's why I was trying to make sure that it didn't too much like, again, inside baseball, where it's like, you know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And other people go, what the heck is that? A tornado bubble? Wait a minute, what?
So if you're listening, you'll just have to go find me and see a video of it to know what it is.
And I'm sure you got just a ton of videos out there on YouTube.
I do. I have a lot on YouTube, even more so on TikTok. I have a lot on TikTok.
So what is your name they follow on TikTok?
On TikTok, it's Meadow Perry Official because there are other Meadow Perrys in the world. So Meadow Perry Official is my TikTok. I am just Meadow Perry on YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And easy to follow.
Easy
there.
To follow.
And you're on there a lot. I know. As I said, I see you on Instagram. Once I started following you, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think you're at the top of my feed all the time. You're out there like about every day. It seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, do you keep working all the time? I mean, and always looking for that next job. I mean, I understand where Tom Noddy was coming from the standpoint of saying they're thinking, well, hey, it's just bubbles, and so we're not going to pay you much, as opposed to bringing in somebody who's got a bunch of illusions and they've got assistants and everything else. But often you have to have assistants that come in. I've seen you perform before where you've got some guy comes out and he sets up everything, and it's not just one of the stage crew, it's actually a person, I guess, that travels with you. Yeah,
I do hire assistants once in a while for my show. They work as kind of a stage manager and tech assistant for me because it can get really challenging, especially if I'm doing these back-to-back shows. I do have a lot of equipment and it can get grueling. I often tell people, for my show, you're paying for the load in and load out. The show is free. It's the rest of the work around it that you're paying for. Because it is kind of like an illusionist, bringing in all these big props and building them and putting them together ahead of the show. And I actually was really surprised that on Masters of Illusion, when Dean Cain introduced me, he said he called my act a grand illusion. And I'd never heard anyone refer to my act as illusion or anything like that. So that was kind of thrilling of like, oh yeah, I do have big stuff.
Yeah, the illusion of bubbles.
Yeah.
It's really something that you're creating something. And also it's very visually appealing artwork in which that it's only transitional for a moment and then it evaporates. I mean, literally pops and gone. And so it's not like looking at a painting and then coming back to the museum and seeing it then again and again, or sitting and watching it for a long time. I mean, you have to look at, absorb, and appreciate it in the exact moment that it happens.
I often tell, in my bigger show, I tell my audience that this is a unique moment that it will never be shared again because it's a unique audience. The bubble, you never know. The bubbles are different every time. There's a bit of improv to my show. So this show will never happen again.
Have you ever tried to push that to museums and patrons of the arts?
I do have a couple museums that are interested. I'm just starting at the Delaware Children's Museum. We're doing a bubble thing there. It's not fleshed out fully yet. But there's also a museum up in Buffalo that I'm reaching out to. So I tend to stay away from the sciencey aspect of it and go more magic. And
I'm thinking art museum. I'm not thinking about science museum.
Art museum, there was a couple things in the works, and then the pandemic hit, so they got the kibosh. But there's been a couple art installations that wanted me. There's been some outdoor art exhibitions that wanted me, but then they became concerned about the soap on their plants. So, which is a concern because Dawn dish soap is very drying. So,
I hadn't thought about that. You can't really do it in the gallery necessarily, because of where it's going to float about and whatever. I mean, although it's temperature controlled and everything as far as the air and the vents, etc., but the bubbles just might. Hadn't thought of that.
I will say there was one art gallery that I performed in that really was an epiphany for me for the lighting design of my show. Because they had artwork on the walls and they had lights shining up onto the artwork. And so there was this diffused kind of ambient lighting coming off of the white walls.
That must be pretty cool.
It made my bubbles look
pop,
so nice.
So to speak.
It made them look so nice. And that really was what inspired a lot of my virtual show and the lighting design that I did for that. It was really recognizing how the lighting bounces off of other structures in the room, and it just makes it so interesting. That's one of those science things that I really love. The other aspect that I really love about the bubble wall that you've seen in my virtual show is the reflection on the bubble wall, which it was funny. They were saying backstage last night that because they were at the perfect angle, there was a reflection of my image on the bubble wall, and it looked so cool backstage. And they were like, "Oh, I wish you could see it." And I'm like, "I can't see it where I'm seeing it from." But it has a Pepper's ghost kind of.
I was about to say, And also, did anybody take any pictures or anything?
No.
Oh, darn.
They didn't. I'll have to talk to Richard Faverty and get that going. But I really am trying to explore that sort of Pepper's ghost simulation with the bubble wall, and I think that is so fascinating.
That's not a bad idea, because I wonder if you can kind of angle that back instead of just being at 90 degrees. If you have it at a 45-degree angle and then kind of on the floor below you, or have a tray or something that they can actually see something else that appears out of nowhere, and then when you touch the screen, then they disappear.
I
like that
think
idea.
That would be so cool.
That would be very cool. Well, I see that you got a lot of things kind of in mind as far as what you're doing and networking, and also with other artsy types of things, I guess, of what that you could do with this. Is there some place that you have performed that so far that in your short career, which has been fairly short in comparison, that you have a memory of that was something that was really, I mean, the first thing comes to mind. It's like, well, this was particularly difficult, or this was one of my favorite things, either good or bad.
One of my absolute favorites has been performing at the Hollywood Magic Castle.
Oh, yeah. That was just a couple weeks ago.
That was just,
Which
it was just
Michael
last month. It was with Michael Dada and Oscar Munoz.
And Oscar,
And that was just the best experience ever. Getting to do your show, the exact sets over and over and over, and just drilling that.
21 shows.
And you discover things about your show that are so nuanced. And that is one thing that I love. If you've ever seen Carisa Hendrix lecture, is where she takes the audio from her shows and she stacks them up and looks at the audio and sees where all the laughs hit and where all the beats are and what did she do different for this show. getting the chance to do that in a controlled space like that and in a little residency is brilliant and does wonders for the growth of your show.
I would think that also helped build your confidence, because I'm confident that you received a lot of adulation and compliments of saying, I've never seen anything like this. This is amazing. It's one of the first times they probably have had a bubble person. I assume Tom Noddy may have worked there.
Tom Noddy hasn't worked there, but Marco Zappi from Italy did. They actually said, oh, we have Marco's rug here, and we have some stuff from Marco. So I reached out to Marco Zappi, and I said, Marco, what did you leave so I know what to bring? And he goes, what did I leave? I don't remember leaving anything. And I was like, okay, well, I'll see what they have. And he's like, I'm curious. What do they think was mine? They had
just the carpet. You
said, it was just the carpet.
Okay.
Yeah. They said that he left soap and things, but he was like, I didn't leave anything.
Okay.
So, but do
you have to use a special carpet or something on the floor to protect the flooring as you come in or something?
Yeah. So usually when I perform, I use these terry cloth mats, which are easily portable. But when I'm working in a space that I'm going to be there for more than 2 or 3 days, like the Magic Castle
or Chicago Magic Lounge,
Lounge, having a rug is really handy. And so a lot of venues will already have one, because some magicians are messier than others. So they'll already have one. And if not, I just go to a local place and get some black or red rug and put that down. Yeah. So that works out great.
And then you can roll that up, I guess, afterwards.
And roll it up. And usually I just get something cheap, so it's like if it goes in the trash, whatever.
Right. So the act you were doing at the Magic Castle, did you combine silence and music, I guess, with talk act also?
Yes. So the act that I did at the Magic Castle was very similar to what I did last night here, where I combined bubble artistry, a little bit of magic, some singing, and some comedy. Okay. And of course, I close with the bubble wall.
Kind of like Jessica Jane Peterson.
Yeah.
Okay, I love her voice.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's another one of those Broadway fans.
Well, wonderful. Well, congratulations on everything that you have achieved over here.
Thank you.
I'm sure that you have just a very bright future. And if people want to get in touch with you, you've already mentioned about how that they can follow you on social media. But if they do have a question, I guess they can go to the Bubble U, and that's on Facebook, I guess you said?
You can find it on Facebook, or you can go to nonsensekids.com. There's also an Instagram that I don't keep up with for Bubble U, but you can just reach out to me on any of the social medias, or my website, meadowperry.com, or you can even just email me at meadow@meadowperry.com.
Very easy. Easy to find.
Very easy.
Well, now as we wrap up, the name of my podcast is called The Magic Word, as you know, and so I'm always curious to know what it is that is important to you. What's your philosophy of life?
Oh, what's my philosophy of life?
Yeah.
Life, I think my philosophy of life is just to be kind to everyone, because you never know what someone is going through.
Oh, that's a good one. You never know what someone's going through. You may think that they're a bad person. It could be they were just in a bad moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So don't judge that person.
100% believe that. You never know if the person was triggered by something, so give them some slack, even though they were not nice to you.
That goes also for people who are driving. Sometimes you think, oh, this guy cut me off. Well, he could have been in a hurry. You don't know what's happening in that person's life, or where their mind was at the time. But you automatically, anyhow, kind of jump to thinking that's a bad person who's cut you off, or in traffic, or whatever it is. And that happens all day long in different walks of life. That's just excellent advice. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Meadow, thanks very much for your time. I've really enjoyed our chat. I always like to enjoy seeing your act. And again, good luck in the future as well.
Thank you so much.
So for the Magic Word Podcast, that was Meadow Perry. This is Scotty out. What a lovely conversation. I had so much fun chatting with you, Meadow. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you sharing all of your experiences also, not only with me, but also with the rest of the listeners for the Magic Word Podcast. I thank you for sitting down with me, and again, I really enjoyed that. And I want to thank each of you listeners for tuning in from week to week. I certainly appreciate you coming and hearing this. It'd be helpful also if you could like share, and subscribe. There you go. I think I got it all in there. Like, share, and subscribe. We need to try to get this out to as many people as possible in the world. And there are always new magicians coming in or new people who perhaps hadn't heard of this podcast before. So please, again, on all of your social media, like, share, and subscribe. You can always go to Instagram at Scott Wells Magic. And the same thing, I believe it is, over on Twitter. And you can also like our page on Facebook for the Magic Word Podcast. Well, that's enough for this week. We've got another great guest who's going to be coming up then next week since it is the Halloween season. We don't want to forget our season of Boo. I guess I should call this the month of Boo during the month of October. And we really haven't had anything like that since today was such a sweet one. Well, next week's going to be a little bit different. And I hope that you stay tuned for that. Those of you who might like to take a walk on a little bit darker side, might be a way of putting that. I think you might like next week's as well. It's not so scary, but something I think that some of you will enjoy. It's again different since, again, it's the month of Boo. Here we go. So, until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember to be kind to everyone because you just don't know what other people are going through. This is Scotty out.